Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and on behalf of the Irish Parliament's European Union Affairs Committee, I'd like to warmly welcome you to the COSAC Chairpersons meeting here in Dublin Castle. I hope you all had a pleasant journey, and I hope you enjoyed the dinner and entertainment last evening. Can I extend a particularly warm welcome to those chairmen who are participating in COSAC for the first time. Mr. Arto As, who's the chairperson of the European Union Affairs Committee of the Estonian Parliament, and Mr. Janvid Golob, who's the chairperson of the Commission for International Relations and European Affairs of the Slovenian National Council. And I'd also like to warmly welcome two chairpersons that are attending for the first time as chairs. They have been before to COSAC as members of their national delegations. Mr. Miroslav Krečka, who's the chairperson of the Committee on European Union Affairs of the Czech Senate, and Mr. Gediminas Kirkilas, who's the chairperson of the Committee on European Affairs of the Lithuanian Seimas. And finally, I'd like to offer a special welcome to Ms. Chetska Sacheva, who's the President of the National Assembly of Bulgaria. Before we begin this morning, can I just advise you that these proceedings are going out live on television and also on the internet. And we also need to run a very short safety video. So if we could roll the video now, it'll last about 2 minutes. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, may we please have your attention for this public safety announcement. This is the main conference hall. The conference hall has 3 emergency exits. Exit signs will remain illuminated at all times. Please take a moment to check the exit nearest you, bearing in mind that it may be behind you. In the event of emergency, you will be asked to proceed to the exit and move up the stairs to the assembly point located in the lower castle yard beside the church. For your convenience, restrooms are located outside the main entrance to the room. Please ensure that mobile phones are switched to silent while in the conference hall, and remember that Dublin Castle is a no-smoking building. If you are using headsets, we would request that you return them to where you found them when you have finished. Welcome to Dublin, Ireland, and at its heart, Dublin Castle. For over 800 years, Dublin Castle has been at the centre of Irish political and cultural history. Please take time during your visit to tour around the castle, see Ireland's past in pride of place and memory, and enjoy the breathtaking art, furniture and decor. Thank you for your attention, and enjoy your time in Dublin Castle.
Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we live in interesting times in terms of the development of the role of parliaments in the European Union. We've seen changes to economic governance in the European Union and the euro area with the introduction of the European semester, which is now in its 3rd year. In December, we saw agreement in Council on a single supervisory mechanism for banks, and at the beginning of this month came the entry into force of the Fiscal Compact. And we can expect to see further imminent changes envisaged in the 2-pack proposals for strengthening budgetary surveillance in the next year or so. And taken together, these are significant developments. But there are some real concerns that due to an increase in intergovernmentalism, there's been a corresponding erosion of parliamentary oversight. Individually, as autonomous national parliaments, we must ensure that we hold our governments to account for actions taken at European level. And collectively, we must ensure that our voice is heard at European level and that we maximise opportunities for dialogue and cooperation with our colleagues in the European Parliament. I welcome the start of a debate on a genuine economic and monetary union and the issues raised in key contributions to date, including the recent European Commission's blueprint document, President Van Rompuy's report on the subject, and the conclusions of the European Council in December. And while many essential decisions have been taken recently in the midst of the financial crisis, I believe that it's critical that we make sure that our citizens are kept involved in this process. Ireland was the only country to ask its people to ratify the Fiscal Compact Treaty. And after a national debate about the economic merits of the treaty, over 60% of our people voted to approve it in the referendum. And I think that it's vital that these debates take place, not just at a European level, but at a national level as well. I think it brings greater democratic legitimacy and accountability to the decision-making process. Last month's European Council conclusions spoke of the need to ensure democratic legitimacy and accountability in the completion of the EMU. The point that the general objective remains to ensure democratic legitimacy and accountability at the level at which decisions are taken and implemented has merit. However, in practice, the complexities of the multi-level EU system makes this less than straightforward. Where do we fit in, and at what level, in order to underpin legitimacy and accountability, is the question that many of our parliaments are continuing to grapple with. So it's my intention, as Chair of COSAC, that for the duration of the Irish presidency, we'll be taking this discussion forward from a parliamentary perspective. And while it's ultimately the responsibility of parliaments to answer this for themselves, personally, I believe that the lack of any concrete proposals in this regard in the December conclusions was somewhat disappointing. I wish to congratulate my immediate predecessors, Avarov from Cyprus and Eva from Denmark, for the work that they did for COSAC over the last year. And I look forward to our debate this morning with Minister Brendan Howlin and with Commissioner Maros Šefčovič. I'm particularly pleased that the Irish presidency will include a focus on parliamentary involvement in the European semester, and I look forward to hearing from Commissioner Šefčovič as to what he has to say about the role for parliaments in the creation of a real economic union. So I greatly value the opportunity to chair this meeting today in Dublin, and I'm looking forward to a very interesting debate. If you do wish to speak during the debate, can I ask you to please complete the appropriate request for the floor card? And you'll find that in your documentation pack, and there are others available at the back if you run out. You need to pass it to the Secretariat. Speaking time is going to be limited initially to 3 minutes, but I am prepared to reduce this speaking time if needed to make sure that we get the largest possible number of contributions from the floor. I hope that procedure is acceptable to everyone. For the first session, we haven't sent out any cards, so we will take contributions from the floor if anybody does wish to make a contribution. The first point on today's agenda is the approval of the agenda of today's COSAC Chairpersons meeting. A draft agenda was sent to you all on January the 14th last. The draft agenda is in your document pack and it's located on the document table. The agenda will, as usual, deal with some small procedural points, including approval of the outline for the biannual report. This will then be followed by a debate on the priorities of the Irish presidency of the Council of the European Union, and that will feature an address by Mr. Brendan Howlin, TD, who is Ireland's Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform. And the final item on this morning's agenda is a debate on the topic of the future of Europe towards a genuine economic and monetary union, and that's presented by Mr. Maros Šefčovič, who's the Commission Vice President with responsibility for interinstitutional relations and administration. Can I now open the floor for comments in relation to this draft agenda? First comment.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. My name is René Leegte from the Netherlands. We really support the proposal and the letter which was sent to us in preparation of this meeting by our Slovenian colleague, Mr. Roman Jacek. He proposes that the Irish presidency of the COSAC puts the topic of democratic legitimacy and...
Can I just interrupt you? We actually will be covering that in a few items' time, so I will let you come in first on that subject, but we will be covering that. Is that okay? The next point on the agenda includes a few procedural questions which were discussed yesterday by members of the Presidential Troika. The Troika met yesterday evening and we agreed the draft agenda for COSAC and the outline of the biannual report. We also agreed to invite as observers to COSAC representatives from the Norwegian Parliament and from the Northern Ireland Assembly. And accordingly, I'm very pleased to welcome to our meeting today Mr. Sven Roald Hansen from Norway and Mr. Mike Nesbitt from Northern Ireland. Lastly, I advise the Troika that the Irish Houses of the Oireachtas will send a letter to all the chairpersons of the European Union Affairs Committees of National Parliaments to ask them to confirm their intention to maintain the current co-financing mechanism for the COSAC Secretariat from the 1st of January of next year. So we now move on to the draft agenda for the COSAC plenary session, and that's going to take place once again in Dublin Castle from the 23rd to the 25th of June of this year. A draft agenda was submitted to all delegations on the 14th of January, and the draft agenda for COSAC reflects the overarching theme of a forward and outward-looking Europe, and each of the agenda items that we've chosen reflects this overall theme. We've invited the Irish Taoiseach and Prime Minister, Mr. Enda Kenny, to address the meeting on the topic of taking stock and looking to the future, which reflects the achievements of the Irish presidency and the challenges which lie ahead. The title of the second debate is The Future of European Integration, and that's going to feature contributions from Commissioner Viviane Reding, and we're also delighted that Monsieur Jacques Delors, the former President of the European Commission, has agreed to speak to us at that session. The third agenda item is delivering on development, and that will focus on what the EU needs to do to implement its development policy over the coming years. And for this item, we're proposing a slightly different format. Rather than having speakers take the podium, we're going to have a panel-style debate. We're still working to finalise the panel, but I can confirm that Mr. Mo Ibrahim, who's the chairman of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, has accepted our invitation to participate. The fourth agenda item will focus on EU enlargement policy. After Croatia joins the European Union in July, it'll be several years then before we see other countries join the Union. We've invited Mr. Valentin Inchko, who's the High Representative for Bosnia-Herzegovina and the former EU Special Representative, to share his insights into the membership aspirations of Bosnia and also of the other countries in the Western Balkan region. And we intend to add a second speaker to that debate. The final item on the agenda will focus on the challenges facing the generation of young Europeans, and in particular the problem of youth unemployment. As you know, youth unemployment is particularly high in some of our countries. In Ireland, it's over 30%. In some Mediterranean countries, it's over 50%. So we see it as a very important subject for COSAC. But before we discuss the draft agenda, I'd like to refer to a letter received from Mr. Roman Jakic, who's the chairman of the Committee of EU Affairs from the Slovenian National Assembly. And the letter suggests that a broad discussion should take place at the COSAC plenary on how to involve national parliaments more actively in the further strengthening of democratic legitimacy and accountability of the EU in relation to its future development, and particularly in financial and budgetary matters. So can I just ask Mr. Jakic at this stage, would you like to take the floor? Yes.
The main message of our letter is to respond to the Irish, one of the future presidency of the COSAC, to hold a debate on the role of the national parliaments in creating the economical and monetary union. I'm sure we will have a fruitful debate with the Commissioner today, Mr. Šefčovič, but I suppose it will be a more general debate. So my point is to have a discussion on the democratic legitimacy and accountability in the spirit of the letter sent by our colleagues to Mr. Van Rompuy. Thank you.
I think, would our Danish colleagues like to? Okay, right.
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, thank you very much for the brilliant evening last night. I think we all enjoyed it very much, particularly also the cultural event. I send my warmest regards from Eva Kjær Hansen, the chairperson of the Danish European Affairs Committee, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. So she sent me instead, but my name is Happiness in Danish, so hopefully you'll be able to cope with this particular message here. As the chairman said, 2-pack, 6-pack, European semester, and now also the banking union, there are many important initiatives that are being debated and decided in the European Union at the moment. They are vital for European integration and to get out the crisis, but they also sort of put the overall question of the erosion of the democratic accountability on the table, as also the chairman alluded to. The Irish band U2 once had a great hit called "I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For." And I think this also goes for the overall question of democratic accountability, both at the national level but also at the European Parliament level. And despite the European Council's recent call for strong mechanisms for democratic legitimacy and accountability, there is a worrying lack of concrete proposals as to how the role of national parliaments can be strengthened more concretely. And that was one of the reasons why members of 11 national parliaments gathered in Copenhagen on 26th of November to discuss how a more integrated financial, budgetary and economic union could be accompanied with strong mechanisms for national democratic control and accountability. And at the meeting, there was also an initial exchange of this question, and various ideas were put on the table. At the meeting, the participants also agreed to write a letter to President Van Rompuy in order to voice the concern about democratic accountability, and also to invite the President to engage with national parliaments in this vital matter. And in his reply, he confirmed the importance of engaging with the national parliaments, and the next step would therefore be to develop very concrete proposals. To quote another sort of great musician, Elvis, we need a little conversation and we need more action. So for that reason, the chairperson of the European Affairs Committee in Denmark would like to invite for a second informal meeting in wonderful Copenhagen on 11th of March to discuss concrete proposals on how national parliaments can strengthen its parliamentary scrutiny of government actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our colleague from the Netherlands.
Thank you very much, and apologize for my eagerness at the start of this meeting. But I will not start before thanking you very much for the evening you organized for us yesterday, which we really enjoyed. So thank you for that. As I said earlier, we really share the view that the discussion on how to involve national parliaments more actively in further strengthening of the democratic legitimacy of the Union could be useful and necessary, and we would like to support this proposal. But furthermore, Mr. Chair, I would like to make another suggestion in relation to the agenda of the next plenary meeting of COSAC. The agenda of the meeting in June contains a presentation of the 19th biennial report, and the Dutch House of Representatives is very pleased with the proposed outline of the report and the topics chosen. The focus of the report will mainly be the exchange on procedures and practices relevant to the parliamentary scrutiny, and not so much finding substantive consensus within COSAC. We support that focus. The exchange of best practices between parliaments is for the Dutch House of Representatives the main interest of COSAC, and therefore we think it is highly appropriate to have the topics of the biannual report as a separate point on the agenda. We would create a proper opportunity for delegations to share their views on the report and to present their respective practices. Our House is very interested to hear from them, and we look forward to your suggestions on this point, Mr. Chair. I thank you.
Our French colleague.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Chairman. Well, I, in turn, would like to thank you for the wonderful evening yesterday and for the cultural part of the evening. I think we all very much enjoyed it, and it was really excellent. As regards what has just been proposed by our Slovenian colleague, indeed, within COSAC, I think it's important that parliamentarians can have this exchange and obviously dialogue with the citizens are extremely important. I would like to stress that the French National Assembly has adopted a resolution by unanimity based on Article 13 of the EU Treaty. So in the budgetary context, it is proposed that there be exchanges on various topics, the European semester, etc., between European parliamentarians. So I would suggest that this is entirely complementary to the discussions ongoing within the European Parliament. It is important that the European Parliament is discussed both within the EP itself and national parliaments, because national parliaments have those national MPs, members of Parliament, directly elected as well. And I think that the work done in terms of exchanges, dialogue and proposals made by the legislative dimension of the European Union can reassure and comfort our citizens. I know that there's a lot of suffering out there at the moment, and there's a lot of doubts and concerns vis-à-vis European construction, the construction of Europe, and people are afraid that they will be left by the wayside. So I think that our discussions and our initiatives here are entirely complementary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our colleague from Belgium.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. I listened with great attention to what our colleagues have just said, and not to open a major debate, but just to give some food for thought. I think there are two different approaches in terms of what democratic legitimacy is, and in relation to our belonging to Europe, and in particular the countries in the Eurozone. It's clear that tomorrow and over the coming days in Brussels, there will be a major meeting that will look at the European semester. I imagine that some of our colleagues here today will be attending the European Parliament meeting in Brussels tomorrow. I think that if we're not careful, there is a risk that in that context, well, on the one hand, the European Parliament has legitimacy. It is directly elected by the people of Europe. And on the other hand, you have the national parliamentarians, obviously also democratically elected and representing their own citizens, and they have their legitimacy. The difference between the two is that the European Parliament has a term of 5 years, so there's a 5-year period of stability. And during that period, the 41, possibly 42 national parliamentary bodies will have numerous changes. Sometimes there are 5-year terms, but you can also have by-elections, regional elections, etc. That can be very indicative in terms of trends. I would just refer you to the Federal Republic of Germany. So I am concerned that there might be a certain competitiveness vis-à-vis legitimacy. Who has the most legitimacy? Is it national parliaments that they might realize that inevitably there is an abandonment of sovereignty in terms of control over the labour market, in terms of financial and budgetary policy. And on the other hand, you could have the European Parliament that, rightly so indeed, intervenes in its role with a lot of realism and with results. But I think we need to avoid that competition or competing for legitimacy. And as to what our French colleague has just said, I would very much support that. And I think that that would be the way to approach it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our colleague from Poland.
Thank you very much, Dominic. I also would like to thank you for the lovely yesterday evening. I like, Irish music and dances, but after yesterday, much more. Thank you very much. I am one of those who had the chance sorry, to discuss about the rules of national parliaments in Copenhagen, and I think that it is necessary to include it somehow, the debate, during our COSAC meeting, and my question is if it is possible in the agenda which you propose now to have the deep debate about the role of national parliaments, especially in the budget and so such questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Our colleague from the House of Commons in the UK.
Bill Cash, thank you very much indeed. I just want to make one comment in relation to the debate with Mr. Skekovic later, where I hope to be able to intervene, but just simply to make one point, as this issue has now become central to this particular part of the proceedings. I would simply say this, that referring back, of course, to the 5 principles set out by the Prime Minister in his speech, and the question of a referendum, the reason for that is about who governs the United Kingdom. This is not a small matter. This is a matter of the most profound importance to the future of the United Kingdom, and indeed, I would say also to Europe, but I will obviously expect everyone to speak for themselves. I'd simply say this. In the question of who governs, in the question of, in the context of our history, and the whole critical issue of the economy and taxation and spending, the fundamental question, it is the United Kingdom, Westminster Parliament, voted by the electors, which will decide and will continue to decide. It is not possible, if I may say so with great respect, to imagine that you can have 2 parliaments actually deciding these questions. The issue is simple, and it is absolutely fundamental to this debate. There will be, in the United Kingdom, as far as I can understand it, in the past and for the future, no question of 2 parliaments deciding who governs the United Kingdom, whatever the voluntary European Communities Act 1972 may say. Thank you very much indeed. I say that to my friends because I think it's very important that we get that as a central principle of where we're coming from. Thank you very much.
Our colleague from the European Parliament.
Thank you. Thank you, President. And indeed, every one of us was equally happy yesterday evening and enthusiastic about the show, by the way, and giving us the wish to learn more and to see a longer performance of music and songs and so on. By the way, in some of our countries we find very similar music and dances, and I think some of us found ourselves very touched in that respect. Now, concerning what we are discussing now, I think there are 2 issues here. One issue is the agenda of the meeting of COSAC. This is I will come later. The second thing is the proposal made by our Slovenian colleagues. Now, the proposal has 2 different issues, 2 radically different issues. One issue is democratic accountability and legitimacy of the European Union. Now, democratic accountability and legitimacy in the European Union is perfectly stated in the treaties, and we may always come and discuss it and talk about that and see how we could improve. But this is absolutely established in the treaties, which oblige all of us, at least all of us who have accepted those treaties. The second point, which he says is the democratic accountability and legitimacy of something which is not a treaty of the European Union, but which is a treaty that has been discussed outside the community by a number of states, and not but all the states that are members of the European Union. So the second question is to be discussed in mechanisms like the one our French colleagues have expressed. We are all keen to have that discussion, but it is not a discussion that applies to the European Union as such, but to a number of states of the European Union. And it would be a bit strange that states of the European Union which have not subscribed neither the treaty nor certainly Article 13 of the treaty do participate in a debate on something which they don't belong to. That is something which we have to bear in mind. So concerning now concerning the agenda of the COSAC. The agenda of the COSAC in June is an agenda which is very, very busy. It is an agenda which has been formulated by the presidency in accordance to our practice, and I don't think it is possible to add more subjects unless somebody suggests to take out some of the current subjects. Second, I believe that the question which is suggested is a basic issue for the president of the speakers, for the speakers conference, which is going to take place in two months. So we are going to have Šefčovič now having this debate here, where there is room for that. The speakers are certainly going to devote their time to this issue, and then in one of the points of the agenda, of course, in June, one may come in with it. But to have a specific point on this, I think is not possible, and therefore we support the proposal which you made and which the Troika supported.
Thank you very much. Our colleague from the German Parliament.
Dominic, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I totally agree what Edmund Wittbrood from Poland said. First of all, thank you very much for this marvelous evening yesterday evening. I think we all want to see more at the COSAC conference, especially concerning the Irish folk. But let me make one point concerning the Article 13 procedure. In the German Bundestag, in the European Affairs Committee, we had a lively debate about it. And I'm a friend from open words and open debates. So let me make one point very clearly. We were a little bit disconcerted, a little bit, or not delighted, to be more polite, about how it is handled. What I mean, this film is neither produced nor directed by the European Parliament. It's concerning the budget of the national parliaments. And so this procedure is not already fixed, not yet fixed. And what we see now with this parliamentarian week in Brussels, let me say it is perhaps in our eyes more a dialogue, and for this purpose it can be useful, but we decided not to send an official delegation to this meeting. It is not a joint parliamentarian meeting. And perhaps at the next COSAC meeting, it is the best framework to deepen it. Tomorrow morning, it would like dynamite for the framework for your agenda, but there we can perhaps deepen it. And so I totally share the opinion of Edmund Wittbrood, and perhaps we find another opportunity for it. But we, as national parliaments, should fix also the procedure, like it was also debated recently in Copenhagen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, there was a number of contributions there that were very interesting, and a number of suggestions in relation to the agenda of the plenary session. We do have, as Mr. Martinez said, we do have a very busy programme. In relation to the biannual report, there will be an opportunity to debate that during the plenary session. At this stage, rather than to define exactly how we can accommodate people's requests, I think the sensible thing seems to be if the Danish if you proceed with your independent meeting, and perhaps at COSAC plenary you can report back to us as to the conclusions or any conclusions of that meeting. And if we could also ask Avarov, there will be a speakers conference in April in Cyprus. Perhaps you might make a contribution as well at the plenary session. And we'll try to put it in the agenda. We'll keep it short. I'm loath to drop any of the existing suggestions, but we'll work around things to try to make sure that everybody's contribution is taken into account. Are we okay with that? Okay, great. Well, the next item on the agenda is the 19th biannual report. Now, we actually have had some discussion already this morning on that, but in outline, it's proposed that we will have 4 chapters examining the following important issues: genuine economic and monetary union, the European semester of this year, EU enlargement and subsidiarity. So if anybody has any comments on that proposal, we'll take them. Otherwise, we'll move on. Parliaments will be given 1 month, possibly more if needed, to answer the questionnaire, and that's going to be sent out to each of you in February. So this will allow time to finalise the next biannual report in due time before our meeting on the 23rd to the 25th of June. Okay, at this stage, the next item on the agenda is a discussion on the priorities of the Irish presidency of the Council of the European Union, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Brendan Howland, and Brendan is the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform and is just about to join the stage. Good morning, Brendan. Thank you very much for attending. The floor is yours.
So do you want me to speak from here?
Yes, please.
Good morning, everybody. Can I, no doubt, add my voice to those who have already welcomed you to Dublin and to Ireland, and to thank the Chairman and all of you for inviting me to address you today. It's good to see so many parliamentarians in this historic Dublin Castle. I have participated in a number of COSAC events in the past, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to address you this morning on the main priorities of the Irish presidency of the Council for the next 6 months. COSAC has played an important role since 1989 in exchanging best practice between national parliaments and building stronger mutual understanding of different systems of parliament and different traditions and different perspectives. I understand that many of you will have already been briefed on aspects of the Irish presidency from Irish ambassadors in your home states. Many challenges face Ireland as we embark on our presidency. But the grave crisis that faced the EU in 2011 and 2012 has receded somewhat. And this is thanks in no small part to the actions of the Hungarian, Polish, Danish and Cypriot presidencies in confronting this crisis. But the improvement in conditions also demonstrates once again that the EU can respond effectively to severe challenges when its member states act together cohesively and decisively. That does not change the reality, however, that much of the agreed response remains unimplemented and indeed provides a good deal of work for our programme during our presidency in areas such as banking union. Ireland's presidency this year will be our 7th time holding this office. Much has changed since we last held the presidency in 2004, with new institutional actors and a new role for both national parliaments and the European Parliament in EU legislative matters. The Lisbon Treaty also recognised the importance of national parliaments in contributing to the effective functioning of the Union, particularly in relation to ensuring subsidiarity and proportionality. COSAC has a key part to play in developing this role to its full potential, as envisaged in the treaty. In this regard, we welcome the many interparliamentary meetings which take place between national parliaments with the European Parliament on EU matters. We also welcome that the programme of meetings planned by the Oireachtas for the presidency covers a wide range of topics closely linked to our presidency priorities. As with previous presidencies, Ireland remains committed to maintaining the reputation that we built up as an efficient, fair and effective office holder. We want to be honest brokers. As the Union looks towards the Croatian accession later this year, Ireland celebrates its 40th anniversary of joining the EU on the EU's very first enlargement in 1973. Today, Ireland remains a firm believer in the EU and the European project and the benefits of working together to resolve the common challenges that we all face on this continent. Our strong commitment to the Union is based, of course, on our shared values, but also reflects more concretely the benefits of membership which we've experienced over the past 40 years and which have helped transform Ireland economically, politically and socially. The benefits of enlargement and EU membership have had a similar impact on all member states. We must not forget that in spite of the current real crisis, Europeans have never lived longer or experienced such an uninterrupted period of peace, an uninterrupted period of security, and, despite the difficulties of the last years, prosperity. And this was recognized by the Nobel Peace Prize Committee last December. No doubt that many of Europe's citizens have suffered greatly over the past few years as a result of the economic crisis that has befallen us. Unemployment, and particularly youth unemployment, remains at record levels. This is unacceptable. Worse, it's not sustainable. It simply cannot be left unchecked, unanswered. We simply cannot have a generation who believe that their future does not include the prospect of meaningful work. That would represent a deep societal failure, and it would call into question the very many ambitions that all of us have had during our decades and our hopes and wishes for the advances in Europe. Our Union has achieved a great deal, but the crisis, some would say the mistakes made of recent years, have exposed real flaws in the EU governance. Ireland will do all that we can to respond to those challenges that are evident and that remain. We must implement the necessary reforms at both national and EU level to prevent any future recurrence of the catastrophic events of recent times. We must also now move beyond emergency responses to plan for the future and to create the conditions for long-term sustainable economic growth and for sustainable job creation. All, after years of difficulty, we must deliver hope to Europe's citizens that we are on track for a better future. Never before has our presidency programme so closely matched our domestic political priorities, and the domestic political priorities, I dare say, of most member states. That is why our programme is tightly focused on the objectives of achieving stability, jobs and growth. In drafting the programme, the Irish government has been guided by our own experience. While much work remains to be done, the difficult measures undertaken here in recent years are beginning to generate results in our domestic economy. The Presidency's approach to restoring stability is aimed at promoting confidence among business, investors and consumers to get Europe's economy growing, and more broadly, to ensure that the Union's financial systems provide a strong and stable foundation to support renewed growth and employment. The Presidency is determined to implement the European semester system of budgetary and economic coordination in the most effective way possible. The Presidency welcomes the steps that are being taken to enhance parliamentary involvement in the process, including the European Parliament. And the European Parliamentary Week, which will take place over coming days, is extremely welcome. There are complex issues at play here, and it's not, in fact, enough to say that what is decided at European level should be held accountable at European level. We need to concretize that objective. The nature of the semester process is that national issues of a fiscal and structural nature can be decided at European level, yet the responsible Parliament, in terms of the people who will bear the efforts of those measures, is the national Parliament. I know that you will be debating key questions about the future of the EMU with Commission Vice President Šefčovič later this morning. The question of ensuring appropriate democratic legitimacy and accountability in the Union is an integral part of this debate, and COSAC is an important voice. Last week, the Irish Minister of State for European Affairs held an informal ministerial meeting which focused on issues including the critical issue of democratic accountability and legitimacy. Representatives of the European Parliament, Elmar Brok, Roberto Galtieri, and Guy Verhofstadt, took part in the discussion and were joined by Dominic Hannigan, chairman in his role as chairman of COSAC. While there was general agreement on the respective and separate roles of national parliaments and the European Parliament in providing legitimacy and accountability, there was wide support for greater interaction between the European Parliament and national parliaments, including through COSAC. And above all, on the need for greater involvement of national parliaments in the semester process. The Irish Presidency will also prioritise the early completion of the two-pack proposals with the European Parliament. Ireland knows all too well the critical importance of how problems in the financial services sector affect wider economic health. That's why we're attaching such high priority to the proposals for banking union. Effective implementation of the proposals is critical in restoring financial stability in Europe and for breaking the link between banks and sovereigns that was so clearly laid out in the summer of last year. As Presidency, Ireland will seek early agreement with the European Parliament on the single supervisory mechanism. The Presidency will also place a strong emphasis on other proposals to strengthen financial regulation to protect consumers. In preparing for the Presidency, the Irish Government sought to identify measures across all Council formations which, if implemented, can deliver long-term sustainable growth and jobs. That was the underlying objective of everything we've looked at. It also plans to tackle the very pressing issue of youth unemployment, as I've said. The Presidency will work to advance proposals which can best support job creation, including the proposal to introduce a youth guarantee, providing young people across the Union on leaving school with the offer of employment, continued education or training. I welcome the determination to engage in fresh thinking, which comes with some of the work. Next week, ministers from member state governments will gather here in Dublin Castle for an informal ministerial meeting to discuss this and other ways of tackling youth unemployment and youth joblessness, including through the provision of enhanced skills and training. In this regard, reaching agreement with the European Parliament on the Erasmus for All programme will be a priority. The Irish Presidency will also seek to remove the barriers that hinder European Union citizens in living and working in other member states. Reaching a first reading agreement on the Posting of Workers Directive and securing agreement on the proposal on the recognition of professional qualifications will be a priority. 20 years after its launch, the single market continues to deliver jobs, growth and competitiveness. But the full potential of the single market remains unfulfilled. And during its presidency, Ireland will work to secure agreement on the dossier that remain open under the Single Market Act I. The presidency will also, where possible, advance the proposals to be published by the European Commission under the Single Market Act II. The Irish presidency is placing a very strong emphasis on the digital agenda to drive growth and competitiveness in Europe and to deliver on smart jobs. We will seek to advance issues spanning different councils, including intellectual property, cybersecurity, e-signatures, e-identification, data protection, web accessibility, and high-speed broadband rollout. Small and medium enterprises form the backbone of the European economy and are essential to the Union's future economic prosperity. The Presidency will seek to advance agreement on the programme for the competitiveness of enterprise and SMEs, the Smart Regulation Agenda and the Company Law Accounting Directive, which aims to reduce the administrative burdens on micro-enterprises and on SMEs. Many of the programmes and issues that we've identified as Presidency priorities will be dependent on the conclusion of negotiations on the multi-annual financial framework. The role of the European Parliament will be central to securing agreement to support the EU's future financing for programmes including cohesion, an area that falls within my own ministerial oversight, and regional funding and Horizon 2020 that have all got a critical role in underpinning economic growth across the Union. We look forward to reaching agreement with the Parliament on the Union's future financing to deliver jobs and growth for Europe's citizens and to ensure that the programmes supported by the MFF can be implemented as soon as possible. For my own area, the cohesion agenda should be in place so that we can start specific projects as envisaged from the 1st of January next. These programmes include the Common Agricultural and Common Fisheries policies. CAP reform is the major priority for Ireland and the Agrifish Council to ensure food security, to support sustainable growth and employment in that vital sector, and to promote rural development across the Union. Reform of the Common Fisheries policy is also critical to ensure a sustainable future for Europe's fisheries sector. The Presidency will work to build on the strong results of the Cyprus Presidency to advance the integrated marine policy and will support the development of the Atlantic strategy. Ireland are well aware of the positive impact that cohesion funding can have in delivering growth to regions and to communities, some of which can be outlying. A well-resourced cohesion policy can continue to play a vital part in promoting sustainable and fair economic and social growth on an even basis across the Union and within countries. The Presidency looks forward to working closely with the European Parliament to secure agreement on the cohesion package. At regional, national and trans-European levels, investment in Europe's transport, energy and telecommunications infrastructure today will deliver enormous benefits for Europe's citizens and businesses into the future. That's why the Connecting Europe facility is also one of our priorities. The Presidency has also identified research and innovation as a critical area which can deliver sustainable growth and employment and maintain the EU's global competitiveness. Reaching agreement on the Horizon 2020 programme is critical to support growth in this sector. The Presidency will also work to reach agreement on the European research area. While the Presidency will work to enhance Europe's single market, the EU must look beyond its borders to growing markets for our exports. The Irish Presidency programme outlines our plans to finalise free trade negotiations with Canada and to advance discussions with key partners in Asia. We will also work to agree a new free trade and investment agreement between the EU and the United States of America. The Presidency will host an informal ministerial meeting in Dublin in mid-April focused on boosting EU's external trade. the Irish presidency focus is not solely on growth, but on sustainable growth. As presidency, we will work to advance agreement with the European Parliament on several important pieces of draft legislation in the environment area. Finalising agreement on the 7th Environment Action Plan and fighting climate change will be major priorities. While the presidency no longer chairs the Foreign Affairs Committee, Ireland will support the High Representative for Foreign Affairs in her work internationally to promote the Union's foreign policy and its core elements. As presidency, we're also attaching strong importance to helping the world's poorest regions. As we face difficulties at home, we can't forget there are even greater difficulties faced by many in developing regions. A ministerial meeting focused on development issues in February will be followed in April by a major presidency conference on addressing the linkages between climate change and hunger. During its last presidency, Ireland welcomed 10 new member states into the Union. While we will not see any enlargement during the actual 6 months of this presidency, we will work intensely nonetheless to promote and advance the enlargement process. One of the very great challenges that the EU continues to face is to explain to its citizens in every member state what it is doing, what is it about. We do not pretend in Ireland to have an arrangement which should automatically transfer or apply to others. We are respectful of subsidiarity and very conscious that it is for others to organise their constitutional affairs as it is for us to organise ours. Nonetheless, with recent referenda on EU treaties, Irish politicians are acutely aware of the challenge faced with communicating the European agenda, principles and actions to citizens. During the European Year of Citizens in 2013, the Irish presidency wishes to hear more ideas about promoting greater engagement between the Union, its organisations and its citizens. The committees that you represent can play a critical role in this process, and I note with great interest the planned debate at the June plenary conference on the challenge of engaging, particularly with young citizens. Chairman, my remarks this morning highlighted some of our presidency priorities. Time does not allow me to highlight all in very great detail, but I'd be pleased, as you know, to respond to any particular questions members might have. So to conclude, the Irish Government is determined to deliver results for Europe's citizens during our presidency, but we cannot do this alone. We very much look forward to working closely with you, our partners, and the European Parliament to make the progress that our citizens rightly expect, demand, and should get. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a constructive, fruitful, and most of all, a pleasant visit to Dublin.
Minister, thank you very much for an excellent presentation. Now, let's open the floor for questions and comments from colleagues. I'm going to take questions and comments from 5 speakers at a time, and then I'll ask the Minister to reply. And can I just remind people to limit their contributions to 3 minutes? We'll see how we get on. We may have to shorten that later, but if you could be as brief as possible. Thank you. The first speaker is Lord Timothy Boswell.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you in particular for your hospitality, and also warm thanks to the Minister for the very positive tone of his remarks. I think all of us will have welcomed his references to democratic accountability and legitimacy, and a presentation based on values, because my personal opinion is that too often we look at the small print and we don't sometimes have regard to the values of Article 2 of the treaties. In that context, I also welcome his references to and the Presidency's emphasis on enlargement. And I just report that the House of Lords Select Committee, which I chair, will be producing later this year a report looking at the lessons learned from previous enlargements and the future prospects for this. And we hope it will feed in and be a positive contribution. My questions to the Minister are about that. Could he say something about work that the Commission can do in conjunction with the Presidency to unblock some of the current barriers to accession? I'm thinking particularly in the Western Balkans of the best possible use of the pre-accession monies to ensure perhaps bilateral collaboration, infrastructure projects and so forth, and also the important question about restoring momentum to the application for Turkish accession. Can he say, finally, whether other member states share the Presidency's enthusiasm to push ahead at the current time? My final point is, when we face economic difficulties and so forth, that is the precise moment of opportunity when we should be looking to the future as well as to the current.
Thank you, Lord Boswell. Mr. Horcik from Hungary.
Thank you, the floor, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Minister, my dear colleagues, let me start by a famous say, according to which, in Gael language, Ninyard kuhkur le kela, which means there is a strength in unity. Mr. Chairman, I don't know how many members of the national parliamentarians between us who were here 9 years ago. I'm sure that Monsieur Marot and the crew from Belgian Parliament and William Cash from Britain were present, and of course I was present. That COSAC meeting exactly 9 years ago remains memorable for me since the 10 new member states joined the European Union during that semester. The historic fifth enlargement completed in 2007. The continuation of the enlargement process has at all times been among the strategic objectives of my home country. Consequently, one of the priorities of the Hungarian EU presidency was to take the enlargement process forward and to keep its momentum. Since the closure of the accession negotiation with Croatia, the accession negotiation with Montenegro started in June 2012, and Serbia was granted candidate status in March last year. So, ladies and gentlemen, Hungary welcomes these decisions and hopes that this dynamism will not abate. History provides an enlargement serves as a driving force for the political and economic reforms, which paved the way for the stability and prosperity of the whole region. However, in order to maintain the momentum of reform in the countries concerned, as well as the public support in the member states, credible enlargement policy is really needed. Strict and fair conditions are therefore crucial. It is also essential that any advancement is based upon merit. The European Union must remain open towards countries which fulfill the accession criteria and are ready to implement the necessary reforms. I welcome the Irish presidency will focus on a credible enlargement policy, since it is an overall interest that Europe becomes really whole and free. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I would like to talk just a few things. The multi-financial framework, which remains in key priority. Indeed, the Union needs a stable basis for its challenging work. Considerable efforts were made last November by President Van Rompuy in narrowing the very large differences between the positions of the member states. We all hope, Mr. Chairman, that a fair compromise will be reached at the European Council meeting of the next week. So, Mr. Chairman, I wish a successful presidency for you, as you had 9 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kirkilas from Lithuania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me say thank you for your hospitality and excellent organization, and of course, in particular, nice dinner. And we saw a part of great musical culture, Irish part of great musical European culture. Thank you very much, and thank you for the Minister for the presentation. Lithuania welcomes the priorities of the Irish President and wishes it every success in implementing them. Recently, my committee got a very good presentation of your embassy, and it was met with very, very interesting and many questions. The goals under the TRIO program to restore confidence in the Union's economy and promote economical growth and job creation coincide with the priorities of upcoming Lithuanian presidency.
the effectiveness of Ireland's decisions on these and other issues will be crucial for the success of the Lithuanian presidency as Europe as a whole. Mr. Chairman, Ireland's wide range of expertise in dealing with the financial and economical crisis will undoubtedly be useful in addressing pan-European issues such as the creation of banking union, economical growth in Europe, youth unemployment, and other matters. Let me underline in particular youth unemployment problem in my country. Today we have a little bit more than level unemployment, a little bit more than 12%. Almost 40% among this unemployment people is young people up to 30 years. It's you know, it's a very, very important sensitive problem. It's destroying our families. We lose, in particular, few last years, several 100,000 people. Thanks, of course, using this opportunity, I'd like to say thanks for the island, for the Irish people, which are taking many out, but we need them at home. So, by decision, I'm welcoming COSAC plenary sessions in the end of June, which one of the topics, European future for the young citizens. It's very important. Mr. Minister, you mentioned that we are on the track for the better future. I believe in that. Let's do it together. And I'd like to ask you, what is your government using? What is the measures your government in particular for the young unemployment? How you have decided that, and how you are working together with the European Union and the European Commission? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Danielle O'Roy from the French National Assembly.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Minister.
Voilà, c'est meilleur comme ça. Donc, merci.
So, thank you very much for that very instructive speech. Before picking up on your 3 points, stability, employment, and growth, I would like to point out to what extent, for those of us, I mean, we're all going through difficulties at the moment, but it's important for all of us that a state like Ireland, which has done a lot and has been very brave in tackling its own financial imbalances and economic problems. So it's good that Ireland is now able to share lessons with us, lessons that they have learned from a situation which now is stabilized. And we really should congratulate the courage of the Irish people as a whole. And we need to see now which lessons we can learn from that. What can we learn from the fact that the original crisis in Ireland was a result of a lack of financial regulation? And what do we need to do now to avoid every country in Europe having this kind of crisis in the future? A second question on stability, of course. We cannot continue to ask the people to make sacrifices and suffer without having some good news, some positive results. So what is Ireland's point of view on the multi-annual financial framework? Will this address the concerns of the population? Now, the Common Agricultural Policy, cornerstone of the European Union, it's under debate, it's being discussed. Now, the greening of the CAP is one of the cornerstones of the policy. And what does the Irish policy think of that? Will the Irish presidency helping the rest of the European Union in making the right decisions on the greening of the CAP? On employment, youth unemployment, and since Minister, you touched upon this point in great detail, where do we stand on financing of the Youth Guarantee, which is a European program, I think, the European program, which really makes sense of this whole discussion? And then the financial transaction tax. It should be able to get started now. We get the impression that there's a lot for the EU in this. So what role should this tax play? It's a small tax on financial transactions. What role should this tax have? And finally, I think we should also point out that growth is important, but stability does not have to mean austerity. And even people in the IMF have now acknowledged that sometimes too much austerity is really killing the potential for growth. So what's the view of the Irish presidency on that particular issue? And in particular, I'd like to thank the presidency who, in these troubled times, has not forgotten the question of solidarity with countries from the south. And this solidarity, I think, the budgets are being threatened here to a great extent. So could you please clarify if you plan to help countries in the south and if the EU as a whole is going to continue to commit to this?
you very much.
And that would then allow us to work further on democracy in all these states.
Thank you very much. Mr. Herman de Croo from Belgium.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Bien sûr, les grands thèmes.
Thank you, Chairman. Those major topics, stability, growth, jobs, this is something that we can congratulate Ireland on for having taken those topics to their heart. Now, many of our colleagues are not Eurosceptic, they are Europhiles. But I think there is something that we have to look at. The budget of our union is 1% of GDP, whereas in general, in most countries, half of the GDP is spent on very important things: mobility, security, defence, justice, education, social protection, health, pensions, etc. But with 1%, we need to do a lot. We need to coordinate, we need to find synergies to ensure that we achieve the impact possible. And I have particularly in mind here improvement in a problem that has been around for a number of years, which is European patents and reducing the cost and streamlining procedures for European patents. I think that could be an important tool in world trade. Now, we're in the process of ratifying a treaty with Korea, trade treaty, another agreement with Canada being negotiated, and of course there's always the major partner, the United States. So I think that the single market should promote stability and growth and do all in its power to support that. Now, I think growth is the field that not enough thought is given to at the moment, and I hope that the Irish presidency will prepare the groundwork for negotiation to improve growth. Because, as I say, we just have 1% to work with, and 50% of that is, as it were, recycled and spent again in the member states. So we need to ensure that the proper conditions are in place to achieve the potential. Thank you.
Very much. Minister.
Thank you. And thank you for both your complimentary remarks and for your incisive questions. Firstly, may I begin with our UK colleague and raises, firstly, the extremely important issue, and I'm sure from a UK perspective it has real and clear and current resonance, of democratic accountability, because we must continue to prove to all citizens of the Union that it isn't a monolith, that it is a democratic institution accountable at ground level to everybody, and that's part of the debate we want to engage in, and I know this organisation particularly is suited for that. I should say that although I'm a member of the executive currently, I'm a profound, passionate believer in Parliament, and I will achieve my 30th anniversary as a parliamentarian next month. And I have served as Lascion Corla, our Deputy Speaker of our own Parliament here, and I believe in the rule of Parliament, in holding executives and decision makers to account, and in expressing the will of people, and we need to strengthen and test how, in common with all our various parliamentary and constitutional traditions, that we can advance those issues. On the specific matters raised by a number of speakers on enlargement, can I say that Ireland, as I said in my opening remarks, see enlargement as a priority issue because of our own experience, our experience the last time we held the presidency when we embraced 10 more countries. We see the advancement of the process for candidates and prospective candidate countries as important. I want to commend the efforts of the Cypriot presidency in advancing the agenda. Council conclusions agreed in December allow for further progress. We will, I believe, oversee quickly the final monitoring report on Croatia and expect, obviously, Croatia to become the 28th member on the 1st of July next. For those countries currently in negotiations, the Presidency will work to advance negotiations with Iceland. They're facing their own elections and will set the tempo of that dialogue, but we want to do what we can there. And we seek to open 1 or 2 chapters with Montenegro and push for progress on the rule of law chapters 23 and 24, progress on Turkey's accession. As the questioner, our Hungarian colleague, rightly said, that will depend on the willingness of all parties, both EU member states and Turkey itself, to facilitate that. But we are hoping to open at least 1 chapter, if that proves possible. And I should report positively that even in the early weeks of our presidency, there are modest, positive signs of a willingness to engage in relation to the advancement of the discussions with Turkey. We also welcome the inclusion of the rendezvous paragraphs in the December Council conclusions, which propose returning in the first half of this year, in the next few months, to the possibility of opening accession negotiations with the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia and with Serbia, for the granting of candidate status to Albania, and for the opening of stabilisation and association agreement negotiations with Kosovo. So, as a presidency, we stand ready in these areas to advance should Council so decide. And we believe that in relation to Croatia, the final issues elaborated by the Commission in October will be addressed in the remaining time, and we expect to see Croatia fully ready, as I say, to join in July. So they'll be the next in. We will advance as the Council and Member States wish in relation to other countries. In relation to the question on the MFF, and I agree that I hoped I characterised it in my opening remarks, that we need to look forward. We are mired in crisis, and that is the fixation of most of our people. Certainly on the island of Ireland, people are looking at their own economic well-being right now. But we must have a vision of hope, as I indicated, to the future, and a successful conclusion to the MFF discussions, which we hope will take place, which we hope will be achieved, I should say, on the 7th and 8th of February at the next Council meeting, will be important in that regard. Our Hungarian friend used that wonderful Irish phrase, Ninjartko kor lekela. There is no strength until we act together. And I think that is the metaphor for all of us, and the maxim for all of us, that we need to not become more nationalist focused, but that we look at our common strengths and all that we've achieved together. And I strongly agree that the stability basis, we need a stable basis rather for advancing our ambitious agenda. Our Lithuanian colleague talked about youth unemployment, and when you look at the EU 27, youth unemployment averaging 20%, Ireland youth unemployment averaging 30%. For Greece and Spain, youth unemployment a shockingly unsustainable 50%. We need to have concrete mechanisms to deal with that, and the youth guarantee, which will be advanced hopefully during the Irish presidency under the stewardship of my colleague Joan Burton, I hope will put practical advance to that. The chairman is telling me I'm going too slow, so I'll be very brief in the next minute. I wanted to say something to our French colleague who characterised Ireland as brave. We had to do what we have to do, but the situation here, and I want to abuse my presidency role by saying things are not stabilised. We are in the process of stabilisation, but we do need further discipline, and we do need further assistance and understanding from our union partners. And I agree entirely that austerity is not a proposal, or it's not a tactic in and of itself. It has to be met with specifics in relation to growth and so on. We'll pick up other issues, the colleague in relation to North-South solidarity is important, and I've dealt with that, and our Belgian colleague again on trade, and I think I've dealt with that in my opening remarks.
Thank you, Minister. We are quite tight for time, and we have got another 15 speakers indicating that they'd like to contribute. So I'm going to actually have to limit people to 2 minutes from this point onwards, and that way we make sure that we get everybody in. So, having said that, our first contributor is Anna Birchall.
Thank you, President, and thank you for your kind hospitality of last night. In his speech of January 16, 2013 in the European Parliament on the Irish presidency priorities, Mr. Barroso said that we must have an agreement on the multi-annual financial framework in February. We also hope an agreement will be reached, but we focus more on the fair allocation than the date. In our perspective, a fair allocation would be providing sufficient funds to the common agriculture policy and the cohesion policy in a way as to preserve the development rate of the concerned sectors in Romania, for example. Regarding the Schengen accession of Romania and Bulgaria, we will highly appreciate the position of the Presidency determining the adoption of a decision on an accession timetable. We are very interested to see the measurements on stability, growth and jobs enforced in a timely manner. We hope that the foundation of generating sustainable growth will be achieved. As you know, the free movement of workers is a very sensitive issue for Romania, as many member states have chosen to extend restrictions to the limit provided by the accession treaty, meaning end of 2013. We very much appreciate the decision of Ireland to lift the restrictions for Romania and Bulgaria concerning free access to labour markets, and we will be very satisfied to see a stronger reaction of the Presidency to encourage a swift lifting of the measured restrictions based on the fact that no massive immigration in member states having allowed free access occurred, and the fact that the free movement limitations could no lower the unemployment rates. The whole EU concept is strongly linked to the free movement, and besides, it is not simply fair to have some member states are benefiting from labour migration to other member states while their own labour market is being protected from Romania and Bulgaria workers. And I think it is fair and appropriate to ask all the EU members and EU institutions in such a manner that they should extend the same rights to the new entries that are enjoyed by the existing all member states. We are welcome and strongly support the specific priority of the Presidency regarding the job creation, especially among the youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. René Legt from Netherlands.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I would like to thank Mr. Holin for his introduction. And as he is present today, it gives me the possibility to inform you all about the good Dutch practice in the field of public expenditure of EU funds. As you all know, the EU is financed with public resources from different member states, and obviously all European taxpayers benefit from proper spending of this money. What less people know is that a large share of the EU budget, about 90%, is actually spent within the member states. And altogether with the European Commission, this makes member states co-responsible for the way this money is spent, managed and controlled. And what a lot of member states do not want to know is that the European Court of Auditors has given a negative statement of assurance for 18 years in a row with regard to spending of EU funds. The error rate is much too high, and it's not on European level where the errors occur, but I'm afraid it is on the level of the member states. And the member states, as I said, are accountable. Dear Chair, only 4 member states have a practice where national parliaments hold a government accountable for the way they spend European funds. Those 4 member states do so in a transparent manner. And the 3 others, I would like to say well done to the UK, Velgjord to Sweden, and Kennemstek to Denmark. But dear colleagues, the European citizens have the right to know how their tax money is spent. And I therefore call upon you as parliamentarians to step up your obligations and to improve national accountability for EU funds. Transparency and accountability are crucial for the people's trust in the EU. And that's our responsibility. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Simon Suter from the French Assembly.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, chers collègues, l'Irlande a accompli de gros efforts pour redresser sa situation.
Well, Ireland has made great efforts to improve the economic and financial situation, and we can see the results of that today. I'd like to wish the Irish presidency every success. Much has been done over the past months at European level. The stabilization mechanisms have been put in place. The European Union has done something which is not easy. It has equipped itself with a pact for stability and growth, which France, we felt was essential. So much has also been done on the banking union. The European Council in December set out the roadmap for the economic and monetary policies for the future. So, and there's a lot happening in 2013. And economic activity is still subdued. We have to further stabilize the Eurozone. We have to ensure that there is budgetary balance to ensure that the financial system works properly. Otherwise, there would be an adverse impact on our economies. We have to set out the economic and monetary contours over the coming months. And we have to ensure that each member state does not act in isolation, that we act in parallel in a complementary fashion. And many of the colleagues have talked about a very important point, youth unemployment. You, Chairman, has also stressed cohesion and territorial policy. This is something which I think has to feed into future negotiations on the budget. Europe has to become closer to the citizen in concrete terms. In order to achieve that, we have to deliver a message of hope and solidarity. We support the focus points of your presidency, focusing on the citizen and making investment that will promote jobs. Apart from your priorities, I think that we can do efficient work to increase growth and jobs in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hajrula Messini from the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, first of all, allow me to welcome the start of the Irish presidency of the European Union and to wish you successful mission. I would also like to use this opportunity to thank you for your warm welcome in Dublin. I am very pleased that the Irish presidency will continue to give priority to the credible enlargement policy and that Ireland will work to advance the enlargement process and support the countries that are in the process of preparation for membership. For us, as a country with candidate status from 2005, it is especially important to continue with the reforms we are making in order to reach the standards of the Union. And in this context, development of good neighbourly relations is on top of the agenda of the leadership of my country. But for love, you need a partner. That's why, in this occasion, I would like to invite my colleagues from Bulgaria and Greece to come in Macedonia and discuss for this open issue. For us, Ireland is synonymous with enlargement. You joined the Union 40 years ago during the first enlargement, but during your 2004 presidency of the EU, 10 new countries became members of the Union in the so-called Day of Welcomes. We hope that this tradition will continue, and that during your presidency we will again see a positive example regarding enlargement. We hope that Macedonia will receive the date for opening negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Mehmet Tekeli Oglu from the National Assembly of Turkey.
Thank you, dear colleagues. I greet all of you with respect on behalf of our parliament and country. First of all, we congratulate the Irish presidency. We hope this is going to be a fresh restart in terms of Turkey-EU relations. We expect a new step forward to be taken during EU presidency of Ireland regarding the chapters. We appreciate the support of Ireland during our EU accession process. We think that Ireland comprehends Turkey's existing circumstances and understands us. In this context, we believe that Ireland is going to be able to convince the EU to move our accession process forward. Our relations with the EU that have a history of almost 50 years are multifaceted, deep-rooted, and accession negotiations are one of the main aspects of this relationship. Unfortunately, our negotiations have come to a standstill. However, we are determined to continue our reforms regardless of the stalemate in our accession process. We cooperate with the EU in the field of common foreign and security policy. However, foreign, security and defense policy chapter is one of the 18 chapters that are blocked. Another blocked chapter is related to the subject of this meeting, Chapter 17, Economic and Monetary Policy. This chapter doesn't have an opening benchmark, and our negotiation position has been already conveyed to the Council. Furthermore, the parliamentary contacts between Turkish and European Parliament and the national parliaments of the EU member states also constitute an important dimension of this relationship. We initiated the Parliamentary Exchange and Dialogue project jointly with the EU in May 2012. To conclude, opening new chapters is going to be a strong and clear signal demonstrating that the process is moving on. It's time to open new chapters as a fresh agenda. It's in the interest of both parties that accession negotiations regain momentum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister.
Thanks again. I'll gallop if I can this time. A Romanian colleague referenced the MFF, and so much is dependent upon having conclusions of the MFF if we're going to advance the specifics of the cap, or the specifics of cohesion, or the specifics of the other funding instruments. We need to have a conclusion in relation to that. And we wish President Van Rompuy well in his efforts in that regard, and the Presidency will give every support to him in that regard. In relation to the issue of the free movement of workers, I've referenced that in my opening remarks, and it's something that we will be working on during our Presidency. Our Dutch colleague, I'm, as Minister for Public Expenditure, very mindful of prudent and disciplined expenditure, and, as you rightly say, accountable expenditure, and we all have to be mindful of that. Our French colleague made a number of important points that I just want to reference and respond to. In relation to the banking union, we have an ambitious agenda, the shape of which was expedited because the needs of Europe demand it, and we now need to concretize that, and that will be one of the jobs that we have set ourselves as a priority in the coming 6 months. I absolutely agree that we need to act in parallel. In terms of youth unemployment, your comment on cohesion is well made, and the idea that we should focus on the citizen in the implementation of those policies is also important. Our former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia colleague talked about the enlargement process. Certainly the Day of Welcomes was something of a joy in Ireland during our last presidency, and I think we need to have the mindset, and I think the Union does, that even in adversity, when we become more introspective, that we haven't yet set boundaries to the Union, and that we need to advance the discussions that are ongoing. And that leads me to the final comment of our Turkish colleague. I've already made mention of the Turkish dossier. We have taken soundings already, and although the Turkish colleague has talked about stalemate, I hope that that doesn't characterize the Turkish discussions over the next 6 months, and I can just confirm that as Presidency we hear clearly the views expressed by our colleague from Turkey.
Thank you, Minister. The next speaker is from Germany, Mr. Rainer Robra.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll speak German. It will be translated in English and French. Meine Damen und Herren, die Verhandlungen zum mehrjährigen Finanzrahmen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the negotiations on the MFF have not been successful so far, unfortunately, and I would appeal to all the member states to conclude them as quickly as possible and have the necessary spirit of compromise. And I welcome the fact that Mr. Brendan Howland, the Minister, is attaching a lot of importance to this. We need this decision for the operational programme. We already have the new programming period, which will begin in 11 months, and we're talking about competitiveness, stability, growth, jobs, and we don't have a lot of time left. At this point, let me mention a specific and very topical difficult problem. Germany is very much in favor of the regional aspect and to have a shift in the way that the regional policy is funded and a new range of instruments. A number of days ago, the relevant minister said that, bearing in mind the historically low interest rates, that was there a need for this shift? I would counter with the argument that access to the capital markets is still difficult for small and medium-sized enterprises. Furthermore, we plan for 7 years, and interest rates can change very quickly. The new financing instruments, particularly when it comes to promoting SMEs, have proven their worth. They have a long-term impact, and they're necessary. And under the Irish presidency, I think that they must also constitute an important element in the negotiating box. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Edgar Meyer from Austria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also speak in German. I hope you have any translation for the people. Die irische Ratspräsidentschaft hat ein ambitioniertes
The Irish presidency has proposed an ambitious program. I would congratulate you on that and wish you all the best and a lot of stamina in pushing that through. Now, we've heard a lot of what Ireland has done in previous years to get a grip on the debt that has been incurred. And I think that a lot of tough measures have been taken, but I think that will contribute toward positive developments in the future. So we have the highest respect for that. Now, 5 years later, we still have a lot of challenges to meet, but we have every confidence in the Irish presidency to meet those challenges. I would agree with the minister that Europe can no longer afford, given the crisis, to delay. There are a number of points. Stability, for example. In Austria, we've had to experience difficulties with the banking sector. We absolutely need measures to be taken in the banking sector and to ensure that the problems that have occurred will be controlled in timely fashion. At the moment, the Austrian Parliament is discussing the annual report on growth, and we're trying to see how the priorities can feed into our national debate. Then, very briefly, on investment for sustainable jobs and growth, the topic of high youth employment has been mentioned by a number of colleagues, and it's a serious problem in a number of countries in Europe. I think it's very good to have this topic. I think it's crucial that we bring European youth onto the European labour market. We need to be innovative and have job guarantees and various schemes in place. We're also very much interested in the growth potential of the single market and exploiting that growth potential. Then, as it regards enlargement of the European Union, and particularly the countries of the Western Balkans, there you would have our full support.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Gunther Quickbaum from Germany.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ich möchte ebenfalls in Deutsch.
I would also like to speak German. Since you already have your headset on, first of all, let me thank you very much and congratulate you for your program. I think that we want to focus on construction. And when I say congratulations, I'd also congratulate you on your 40 years within the European Union, because you have demonstrated what can be achieved through membership of the European Union. And I would very much welcome other countries to see the potential and that they would have the opportunity to look back on such a period of EU membership. And because of the time constraints, I'd like to pick up one point. Now, we have a referendum in 2015, 2016, 2017, but that would be too late. We cannot allow ourselves to be paralyzed for this amount of time. Now, there is the charm that in 2014, Scottish people will be able to vote. There'll be a referendum. So whoever in Scotland would like to remain within the European Union, it's clear that they have to vote for Scottish independence because they have no control or no way of knowing where their country might be and what the vote, how the vote would go in a year or two later, in that later referendum. So time management is crucial here. We need to give consideration to how in future we can tackle our problems and consider our problems together with a view to a solution. This European Union, it's not a multiple choice event. It's not a cherry-picking exercise. So I would like the discussion to also have discussion on the advantages of being members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miguel Martinez from the European Parliament.
Thank you, President, and congratulations and gratitude to the Minister. As you certainly know, but perhaps not all our colleagues do know, a couple of weeks ago, your Prime Minister Kenny presented the same priorities in the European Parliament, and I'm very happy to say that the result was a reaction, an overwhelming reaction of hope and even enthusiasm, which even the oldest among us had never, would not remember in the House. You see, Perhaps, among other things, it was because he did not mention the word austerity actually in his whole speech, neither in his responses. I have 5 questions because there is no time for more elaboration. First of all, do you intend to follow, according to what our French colleague said, to follow the proposals of the European Parliament in what has to do with the financing of the youth guarantee? The second question is, okay, it's fine that you make progress on the banking union. Are you going to undertake some even minor steps in that has to do with the fiscal union? The fiscal union is more embarrassing, I suppose. But you see, if European citizens must know a number of things, they must know also that, for instance, from the 21st main enterprises in Portugal, there is only one paying taxes in Portugal, but 16 pay taxes in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, they have one office with 1 or 2 people, and in Portugal, they have 5,000, 7,000 people working and producing. But this is something we have to bear in mind. The next question has to do with what I believe is your key challenge, which is the financial perspectives. And this is something that must be ready at the end of the year, because it is the perspectives for 2014 to 2020. And how are you going to be able to undertake your priorities while the resources that are put at your disposal are what we are talking about? One more word. We did not get much of an answer from the Taoiseach about the social dimension. The social dimension is not among your priorities, but we believe it is essential also for a country like yours. And indeed, I would like to ask one word about the political union. Do you believe political union is a priority, yes or no?
Thank you very much. Before we ask the Minister to respond, Mr. Slaven Radunovic, please, from Montenegro.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the delegation of Montenegrin Parliament, I'd like to take this opportunity to greet you all, especially the speakers who supported further enlargement process, of course. And also to wish to our host colleagues from the Republic of Ireland a successful semi-annual presidency of the European Union. European Council decision of June 2012, which gave the green light for Montenegro to start accession negotiations, as well as the positive opinion of the European Commission of October regarding the previous efforts made by the Parliament, the government, and the entire Montenegrin society, all represent the confirmation that intensive and comprehensive work in process of successful fulfilling the obligations of the European agenda has been recognized. Despite the difficulties facing the European Union, it is very important for the Western Balkans that EU enlargement policy is reaffirming. We are convinced that the issue of enlargement process is important for the further progress of the Western Balkan countries and the long-term stability of the region. Considering the importance of the national parliaments given by the Lisbon Treaty, but also being aware of the fact that the membership negotiations is the most demanding phase of the European integration process, the parliament in the legal and political system of Montenegro has an increasingly important role. Adapting to changes in the status of the state in relation to the accession process, the parliament is changing some of its own working models, adjusting its activity to the dynamic of the process. Following recent changes of the rules of procedure, the Parliament of Montenegro operates with an increased number of working bodies and new obligations which guarantee stronger control function of the Parliament. There are two committees that have been created. The role of the Committee for European Integration is directly overseeing the negotiation process, and there is also Anti-Corruption Committee as parliamentary response to demanding negotiation chapters 23 and 24. Finally, we in Montenegro are fully aware that the European integration process faces many challenges, and we guarantee you that we remain committed to adopting European values, fulfilling obligations, and full implementation of reforms which will ultimately lead us to full membership in the European Union. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you. Beginning with our German colleague in relation to the MFF and where we're at, I agree that, as with all European business, we need to approach it with a spirit of compromise. My experience, of course, is that most negotiators expect the compromise to come from the other side. So if everybody has exactly the same view, and I am heartened to hear the German perspective that will be one of compromise. This, as you know, will be led under the Lisbon Treaty by the President, President Van Rompuy, and we stand to support his endeavours, but we're very conscious that there are 70 separate sectoral regulations underpinning the various elements of the MFF, which we need to advance with the Parliament. And I hear what he says about regional focus. In terms of our Austrian colleague, yes, it is an ambitious presidency programme. I want to thank you for the confidence you've expressed in our capacity to deliver. I think we have a reasonable track record in that regard as we approach our 7th presidency. You talk particularly about what instruments for growth we need to have, and I think we need to develop those in discussion. The European Investment Bank itself needs to be less cautious, in my view, and it has in the last year become more ambitious in the role it plays. And obviously the advancement of the single market issues that I referenced in my own contribution are all important. Our other German colleague, Kriegbaum, made a reference to the Scottish referendum. You'll forgive me for not straying into our Celtic neighbours' affairs, but I do want to say this, and it is important for Ireland, and I believe important for the Union. The UK is an important member of the Union, an integral driver of the Union, and I hope that they will map out a future as part of the European Union. But that is a matter for the UK ultimately. In terms of our European Parliament colleague Martinez, thank you for the kind comments in relation to the Taoiseach's presentation to the European Parliament. We were heartened to see the positive view, and I agree with you, and I said it in my own contribution. We need to get beyond being mired in negativity, and we need to have hope. But that hope has to be built on solid foundations, and we collectively need to build those foundations. So let me deal with the specifics. The Youth Guarantee, obviously the European Parliament approach is important. We need to crystallise the view of the Council, and my colleague, the Minister for Social Protection, will be doing that as a priority during the next few months. In terms of fiscal union, there is an issue in terms of domestic taxation. Obviously, that is a matter that we have, as a member state, strong views on. But we have, I think, an ambitious agenda in relation to the banking union provisions that need to be prioritised now. So let's take this incrementally. I've answered the question on the MFF, I hope. In terms of the social dimension, and I strongly agree, I've referenced some of the social dimension issues that are on our agenda to be advanced. I've talked about the youth guarantee, the portability of pensions, which is important for people to move, and the free movement of workers, which our Romanian colleague, I think, has underscored and put so much reference to. In relation to political union, your final question, well, in the treaty, in the original founding treaties, the treaty view has always been that we work towards ever closer union. That has always been Ireland's perspective, and it certainly is my personal perspective. And finally, in relation to our colleague from Montenegro, can I thank you for the very comprehensive outline of the work being done by Montenegro in advancing the dossier that will lead, hopefully, to Montenegrin accession in due course.
Thank you very much, Minister. The speaking list is now closed and we have 6 further people wishing to speak. So I'm going to propose that we take the next 6 together and then ask the Minister to make a final response. The first contributor is Arni Thor Sigurdsson from Iceland.
Mr. Chair and Minister Haldin, there are 2 issues I would like to raise with regard to the relationship between Iceland and the European Union. First, the status of Iceland's accession process, which was mainly on track since Iceland applied for EU membership in July 2009. For some time it has been evident that we would not finish the accession talks in this legislative tenure, as many had hoped. Given the upcoming general elections in Iceland in April, the government has thus decided to slow the process down so that no new chapters will be opened and no new negotiation positions on individual chapters will be finalized on the Icelandic side. This also means that the political parties will have time to discuss the European question in the election campaign and that no major decisions should be made in the next 3 months. And it is important for the incoming parliament will have the opportunity to finalize Iceland's position in the crucial chapters of agriculture and fisheries. Which brings me to my second point, with which our Irish hosts in particular are very familiar, the mackerel fisheries. As we enter 2013, there is still no solution to the dispute over mackerel fisheries in the North Atlantic, which involves EU, Norway, Iceland and the Faroe Islands. On the contrary, the war of words is escalating and calls on sanctions against Iceland, which has a proven record of sustainable fisheries, in contrast to the European Union, have grown louder. Climate change has significantly altered the behavior and distribution of fish stocks across the Atlantic, and research shows that roughly 25 to 30% of the total mackerel stock is in Icelandic waters. It is therefore greatly damaging and irresponsible that the EU and Norway have unilaterally claimed 90% of the scientifically recommended 2013 mackerel catch, leaving only 10% for the other coastal states, Iceland and the Faroe Islands, as well as Russia. This ignores the changed migration pattern of the mackerel stock and will almost certainly result in serious overfishing. The key to solving the mackerel dispute is to take into account these changed circumstances and respect the legitimate interests of all coastal states. We assume that the European Union will refrain from threats of sanctions and work with us to find a permanent and sustainable solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Avroth Neophytou from Cyprus.
Firstly, thanks a lot for yesterday's wonderful evening. Also, allow me to congratulate your country for its great success in achieving the financial goals of the Memorandum of Understanding much earlier than the program required. That means that Troika assistance is not a devil, but can provide the real financial assistance for countries in need. Let me just make 2 comments concerning the North via South and solidarity via fairness. We need Europe to show its solidarity, but we have to be fair for the taxpayers of the northern countries that we ask them to pay the bill for our needs. Concerning austerity and growth, it's not such a dilemma. In order to sustain a growth in our economy, we have to take the necessary austerity measures. We have to work all together for establishing of the banking union, which will safeguard the financial stability. Of course, the single supervisory mechanism it's a must in order for us to have the banking union. And it's not fair for the taxpayers to continue to carry the needs of the banks And since we established the banking union, we have to work for the direct recapitalization of the banks and to separate the needs of the banks and not to be added in the sovereign debt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Edmund Whitbrod from Poland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I also would like to thank you, Minister Howlin, for presenting very important priorities. I may say that Poland fully supports them. And also I think that the jobs, especially for youths, is very important. We have also that problem in Poland, over 20%. But also I think that, you know, all the goals which we are speaking about, they are somehow included into strategy European Union 2020. We have also our national reform programs. And I think that when we speak about the multi-annual financial framework, then the budget should be oriented for the strategy Europe 2020. Also, we should do it in our countries. And my question is, you know, today it is 2013. So that's 3 years when we realize the strategy. And do you think that, I think so, that we should monitor how the strategy Europe 2020 and also our national reform programs are working? If we achieved some, you know, the results which we expected to achieve after, let's say, 3 years, what do you think that should we do it or how to organize it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fernand Boden from Luxembourg.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman.
Monsieur le Ministre a dressé une grande liste.
Well, the Minister provided us with a long list of priorities for the Irish presidency. And I can tell you that we will do our best to support Ireland in its efforts to achieve all these priorities. Now, a certain number of these priorities, such as the Common Agricultural Policy, cohesion policy, battling youth unemployment, many of these things will depend on the results of the MFF. On several occasions already, you've been asked about the need for a speedy decision on the MFF. I could just tell you that we also feel that this is essential, and we need now to ensure that the Commission's proposal is not excessively undermined. Otherwise, we're going to have further problems with the European Parliament, and that will drag on. So I'd like to call upon you to play your role and not just rely on the wisdom of President Van Rompuy. The essential problem here, I think, is youth unemployment. This needs to be a political priority for all of us. And I think we need a European project which will show that we're not going to sacrifice the young, that we're going to do everything we can to help them find jobs. And we also need to think about our industrial basis in Europe, which, in my view, is really heading in the wrong direction. And I think we need to re-establish our industrial basis, because I think we're switching from being a continent of producers to being a service-based economy, and I think jobs are more and more scarce in that sector. So I think we need to do everything we can to establish a European industrial strategy.
Thank you very much. Mr. Daniel Mondekar from Croatia.
Thank you for the floor, Mr. President. Dear friends, allow me to inform you first on a state of play when it comes to Croatian accession to the European Union. Between our two monitoring reports, the last one and the next one coming in a couple of months, Croatia had a job of 10 points. 8 are already done, 2 are well underway. The Croatian Parliament just voted in a new conflict of interest committee on Friday, and we believe that we are going to be the next members on the June of this year. Also, let me inform you that we had a debate on the goals of Irish presidency with the Irish ambassador in Zagreb, and 3 topics came up. One was youth unemployment, because Croatia has almost 40% of youth unemployment, so we fully support the youth guarantees. Second one was, of course, growth and jobs. Croatia, just as the entire Southeast Europe, has a small but very vibrant IT community, so we fully support any advancement when it comes to single digital market. And third was, of course, the enlargement. Croatia has, let's say, fresh experience, fresh knowledge when it comes to negotiating. We have the translation of the documents, we have the knowledge, and we are fully prepared to help every country in the Western Balkans region on their way to the European Union. We believe that enlargement must not stop, it has to continue, and we are going to be partners for Europe and for our neighbors on their European path. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ruben Moreno from Spain.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We all of us really know that we are going through difficult times, economic crisis and so on. But I think that we must not forget that one of the 4 legs, one of the 4 principles of the European Union is the political union. And I'm saying that because we are talking about accountability, legitimacy. These are the new words. But from my point of view, it's an euphemism not to talk about political union. Listening to some interventions, not today, but during the negotiation processes and meetings, sometimes it's hard to believe that we are or we belong to a union, and this is a concept extremely important from my point of view. I think that this is not a game. It's not a game where we can play in 2 sides. Eventually we'll go through the election of one president, a position that ideally will join both conditions, the presidency of the Council